Welcome to Extraterrestrial Reality. One of the big issues that we have with regard to the alien presence on this planet is the fact that a good chunk of us will not accept the reality of the situation. That's one of the big problems we have. And a lot of us, the rest of us, the ones who have accepted it and understand that this is real, that there is some sort of a extraterrestrial, non-human intelligent presence on this planet along with us, up to something, right? We spend a lot of our time trying to convince the rest of the people in this world that, hey, I think we need to pay attention to this. Something's going on here. Something is here, despite all these years and years of denial. Right. So, I mean, that's the thing. That's the biggest issue here. I mean, if you can't acknowledge reality, how are you ever going to understand it? It's a gigantic problem that we have. And it's understandable, actually, in a way. I can understand why even people within the UFO community really have trouble accepting what the situation really is, what it really looks like. I mean, we have evidence, we have proof. We know now that there is something here. There's no question about it, right? We have the absolute proof that shows that. Despite what anybody else out there might say, right? The reality is that there's something here, and not only is there something here, just as a lot of people who have encountered these creatures and or the craft over the years have told us, right? Not only do we know that now, we know that even better now because we actually see the proof with our own eyes. And what does it all mean? I mean, before we even can get into the implications of it all, right? And there could be some dire implications for all we know. We really don't know. We don't understand it fully because there's not a lot of people out there who have studied this as deeply, for instance, as someone as David M. Jacobs, the author of books like The Threat and Walking Among Us. So we just don't, there's not a lot of research into this field. Only a very, very small group of people over the years have really tried to understand what these creatures are up to. And of course, as Jacobs talks about, he thinks that that it's a hybridization program after, having hypnotizing over 1,000 people over his career. Jacobs determined that there's most certainly creatures here, and not only that, but they're involved in some kind of a hybridization program leading to some sort of change that's going to happen at some point in the future. We don't know what that change is. Other than what Jacobs thinks it might be. I mean, he thinks it might be just some sort of complete, absolute takeover, and how that will go down. Really, he doesn't even know. Nobody knows, and that's if he's even correct. I mean, that's the issue here. Like, there's not that many people that have studied this as deeply as someone like David M. Jacobs. There's other people who did research into the abduction phenomenon, including people like Bud Hopkins, John Mack, among others. But those people are gone. Leo Sprinkle. There's people who have investigated this, and actually those three people are gone now. They're dead. David M. Jacobs is in his 80s. I mean, really, who's talking about this now? Who's studying this now? Who's working with alien abductees at this moment in time? Is there anyone? I haven't really. You don't really hear that much about it anymore. Outside of David M. Jacobs, that's pretty much it. He's the one who really put the time in. So, well, I think, if you haven't read those books that he has written, it's particularly The Threat and Walking Among Us, then you would really do a great service for yourself by reading those books, because I mean, he's really one of the only people who has studied this so intensively, more than anybody else. I mean, debunkers will try to come up with reasonings. It's usually all their reasonings has to deal with the psychological issues. That's how they explain away abductions. But it's just not that easy. It's not that easy when you find out that a lot of these abductions that have taken place over the years, the people who get hypnotized, they're telling basically the same story as all these other people that got hypnotized. And this was before a lot of the stuff was out there in the literature. So they're all describing the same things. They don't want it to be real. It's not like they're making something up. That's just the way it is. They don't want it to be real. They're hoping that they're actually crazy. But yet we're not taking this seriously, and it's understandable why we're not, because first you got to acknowledge the reality of the situation, and the reality of the situation is that it's something we just don't want to touch. None of us really. I mean, I don't like it either. I mean, when you really think about this situation, it looks like there's intelligent insects basically from another world somewhere that are here among us, and they're up to something. They're doing something. They're very secretive about what they're doing, but they're here, and they're way more technologically advanced than we are. That's what it looks like. And they're not human beings. They're actually insects. They're insect in nature. They evolved from insects somewhere. And a lot of people say, according to people like Jacobs and among other researchers, it seems that the hierarchy begins at the top with these creatures that are described as praying mantises a lot of times. And then after them are tall grays, short grays, and sometimes reptilian type creatures. And apparently the ones who are in charge are these insectoid creatures, or as Jacobs calls them, insectolins. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones pulling all the strings, and all these other creatures are doing some sort of a job. Like the small grays are the ones who do all of the abducting, the menial type labor, and then the taller grays, they're the ones who do the examinations and are involved heavily in the hybridization program apparently, and sometimes and actually all of them use telepathy to communicate. The insectolins, they're the strongest ones. They have the strongest neural engagement, according to David M. Jacobs and other researchers. Like when they're able to basically get deep into your mind, they're actually able to create screen memories in people's minds. There's a lot of things that they're capable of doing that the other creatures apparently are not capable of doing. So it seems like they're the ones in charge, and at some point there's going to be some great change. And we're going to see their work, whatever it is, come to fruition. And is that going to be basically a takeover? Is that what we're heading to? And that, basically what they're involved in right now is a scheme to acquire our planet via non-violent means, but by using this hybridization program where they basically insert these hybrids, these half alien, half human creatures all among us, and then somehow they take over, they take control. And by effect, the insects are in control. It sounds absolutely insane, and that's why a lot of people don't even want to go there. But when you look at the evidence that we have, that's what it is. That when you look at, for instance, in the Vegas alien incident, a lot of the creatures that you see there, they're insect-like, these big 8 to 10 foot tall creatures. That were seen there by 3 witnesses, as well as filmed on video. That's what they look like. They look just as described by a lot of other people over the years, over the decades. That's what they look like. And we also see small gray creatures in that. There's UB, the undeniable backbreaker. It's a small gray creature. So now we know it's real. So we know that they are these things that people have been describing for all these years. They are really here. For what purpose we're not exactly sure, but maybe we need to know. Like one of the things. You have to ask yourself a question. Now that once you acknowledge the reality of the situation, then the next question becomes, well, what do you do about it? Do you just sit back and just do nothing and just accept it because there's not much you can do? Is that what you do? Or do you try to figure it out? And then you have to worry about what kind of implications would be involved if you do try to figure it out, if you do try to prevent whatever they're trying to do from happening. Would that cause a reaction from this phenomenon itself? There's a lot of different questions here, but we're not even at the part now as a whole where we acknowledge this reality. We're getting there. We're trying to get there. We should be there because we have the evidence, the proof that shows that they are here. And that proof, it's based on all of the testimony from different witnesses throughout the decades, all of the testimony from people who are involved in these covert government crash recovery and reverse engineering programs. We have all of that. I mean, Roswell is a thing. Actually, something really happened there. There are just too many witnesses to deny it. When you do the research, you would understand this. There's no question about it that we are not alone, that we have the evidence. It's all there right in front of us. It's just a matter of us as a whole acknowledging it and accepting it. But we haven't done that yet. And it's a scary thing to do. It is a step. It's like, okay, everyone has to say at the same time, yeah, they're here. I mean, of course, there's going to be stragglers. There always will be. But the reality of the situation is we are not alone, and we have the proof. So like I said, the question becomes, do we just sit back and do nothing? Or do we try to do something about it? Do we try to figure it out and figure out what they're doing? That's the big question. And to see, these are things. This is the reason I think that a lot of people, even some people within the community itself, that understands and acknowledges that we're not alone, they don't want to go any further than we already are, because the next questions are really, really, really scary ones to have to ponder. That's where I'm at with it. But see, the thing is, these things, I believe, are, I mean, it doesn't make me right. Well, we can speculate all we want. I know there's all these different theories about where they come from. I think they're coming from other planets. I don't think these things evolved on this planet. I think they came from someplace else. That's the theory. You don't really hear about these kind of things throughout history. They're just not there. These insect kind of creatures, you just don't hear about it a lot. It wasn't until the 1950s where these things start cropping up. 1947 is when UFOs really became a really big deal, when a lot of people start seeing them all the time, and it's never stopped. So here we are now, and all of these reports from different people talking about getting abducted, thousands of different reports. All the people like Jacobs had interviewed over the years, little grays, tall grays, insectoid type creatures, and among other creatures, there's reptilian creatures that seem to be part of this deal too. Actually, Jacobs, he speculates that the reptilian creatures seem to have the same kind of responsibilities as the tall grays or the short grays. That they're more they're more taking orders from the insectolan creatures. That's what the rept he calls reptilian. He calls them reptilans, and that perhaps where they came from was another planet that was already conquered by the insectolans, and they could either be creatures that they're using as slaves, or they could be intelligent reptilian type style creatures that were hybridized to work as basically workers for the insectolans. Again, it sounds absolutely insane, but the evidence shows that that's what this is. And so when you sit down and read, before you could even get into talking about the implications, you have to just accept and appreciate this reality. This is the reality. Obviously, what's happened here is this planet has become popular. We don't know what the population is, right? There's a population of creatures present on this planet, operating covertly, using technology that exceeds anything that we have, that looks like they're hail from, they evolved actually from insects from some other world, someplace. And a lot, like I said earlier, a lot of people say they look like praying mantises. Praying mantises, of course, I've talked about this before. They're not that smart of an insect when you study insects, when you read about insects. They're not that intelligent. They just look like them. That's what they just look like them. And some other people describe them as ants. And that actually makes more sense to me. Ants are a social insect on this planet. They're the second smartest insect, only behind bees, on this planet. And you could imagine that on some other world somewhere, if the conditions are would be different, gravity's different, everything's different, but it's a life bearing planet someplace else in this galaxy or beyond, right? That you could see something like that could be possible. Anything's possible. Now that you see it, obviously it is possible because it's happened. That's what's happened, right? On some other world somewhere, the conditions were right where it allowed some form of insect on that planet, potentially similar to the ants that we have on this planet, to evolve, and now here we are. They're here. They're actually flying around in craft. They're intelligent. And you have to wonder, are they similar to the ants that we have on this planet? They could be. Maybe where they evolved, the insects on this other planet, because of the conditions there, things were different, and insects were bigger. And the opportunities were there for these insects on that other planet to evolve, these ant-like insects, to evolve the way they did, because obviously it happened. We need to acknowledge this. I know it's very difficult for a lot of people, but we are dealing, right, with insects from another planet. That's what it looks like. I mean, unless you want to say they're from another dimension or they were living here the whole time, I don't think they were, right? But they came from someplace, and I think that you're going to find out as time goes on that they came from another world. But there are insects here. These creatures are insects. They're the ones in charge. They're the ones behind this UFO phenomenon, apparently, for the most part. Are there other things coming here? Potentially. There seems like there's all kinds of different creatures people see, but predominantly, for the people who do the abduction research, they don't come across anything else. The people that go into offices, for people like David Jacobs over the years, it's always the same thing. It's always the same kind of creatures, described very similarly by different people, and their actions are always jibe with everyone else who comes in his office. So we're dealing with insects from another world, and we need to acknowledge that first, and then take it from there, and then take the next step, right? Try to understand the implications. Try to understand whether or not we need to, or what we need to do. Do we need to do anything? Are we supposed to just sit back and just pretend it's not happening, or ignore it? Or is it a good thing? Maybe it's something good. Maybe it's something that is going to help humankind. I don't know. It could be something really bad where humankind is doomed in the long run because of this. I don't know. But it's something we need to acknowledge it first, and we're not. We're just not acknowledging. This is the part where we're not acknowledging, and we need to begin acknowledging it. But anyway, I dug up some information about ants. I mean, I guess if you're going to start, you got to start somewhere, right? You might as well start right here on this planet and look at what we have here, and then take it from there. I don't know what else to do. You would think that there'd be some scientists out there that would be interested in trying to figure this out, rather than just novice people out there, people who aren't scientists. But that's where we are right now. It's a matter of trying to convince the entire scientific community of this reality. This is not crazy. This is not something getting made up. All of this evidence that we had, testimony, basically, all it was people being hypnotized, people experiencing missing time, and you hear these stories. There's physical trace evidence. There's evidence sometimes that like the late Dr. Roger Lear had accomplished, removing implants from people who were abducted. Little objects that we don't understand what they do and how they got inside these people, or what their purpose is, but it's real now that we see with our own eyes, right? We see with our own eyes the proof that they are here. Now that we see that, we have to acknowledge this. The reality is we are not alone, and we're dealing apparently with some form of advanced insect from another planet, as crazy as it sounds. And it looks like they probably are some similar to ants rather than praying mantises. Anyway, I dug up some information. I'm just going to go through some of this stuff. For instance, for one thing, we'll start off with some very basic information about ants, and this was from the National Wildlife Federation. It says here, ants are most closely related to bees and wasps, which all have a narrow waist that segments their body. The body is separated into three parts: the head, thorax, and gaster, the part of the abdomen behind the waist. There are more than 12,000 species of ant, most of which are black, brown, or red in color. Ants are found almost everywhere on the planet. The only areas that don't boast populations of ants are Antarctica, Greenland, Iceland, and some island nations. Most species live in soil, leaf litter, or decaying plants. The ants' diet varies among species, but most of them eat leaves, seeds, small insects, nectar, and honeydew. Ants carry food back to the nest and are capable of carrying more than 10 times their weight. I guess that's something to consider. The fact that they could carry, the ants we have here could carry 10 times their weight. Does that apply to these ants from outer space that we're apparently dealing with? I wonder. The behavior of ants. Ants use their keen senses to communicate with colony members. They produce chemicals called pheromones, which are sensed by other ants using their antennae. They can also use their antenna or other body parts to send messages through touch. Touch messages are transmitted through stridulations, which are sounds and vibrations generated by one ant rubbing its body parts together. These forms of communication relay different messages, such as where food is located and what dangers are present. Now look at, just think about that. I mean, you have ants that they communicate with each other. They let other ones know where there's danger. They let other ones know where there's food. I mean, so you could see how this would be possible in a different venue than Earth. If there's some other planet out there where ants, some other form of ant, something like an ant, bigger, of course, with the higher degree of intelligence than the ones we have here, but still the ones we have here are pretty smart. Look what they can do. So over time, over billions of years perhaps, some species of ant, larger ant, evolves into what it is now. That's obviously, apparently, what happened, because that's what we're dealing with. We're dealing with insect-like creatures. That's what they are. Anyway, continuing here, it says colonies of ants are separated into groups of individuals that have different jobs, such as workers, soldiers, and queens. The workers are all females that take care of the much larger queen and her young, or go out to find food. Winged males mate with queens and die soon after. Queens also have wings, but they break off after mating. Ants are an important prey species for many different reptiles, amphibians, arthropods, birds, and mammals. Longevity can't be generalized to all ants, but queens usually live for several years and workers for only a few weeks or months. Yeah, you have to wonder too. Now, Jacobs talks about that basically the way the hierarchy of these creatures, these alien beings, this alien presence basically starts at the top with the insectoid type creatures, and then you have the tall grays, the short grays, and of course the reptilians. The reptilians, like I stated before, were, according to Jacobs, could have been another species that from a planet that was conquered by these creatures in the past. And so they're good at this. They already know how to acquire a planet and take it over, and it's already been done. The proof, according to Jacobs, could be seen with his reptilians potentially. But then the other ones you have to wonder are the short grays and the tall grays, are they hybridized insects / humans? Is that what they created them themselves, or are they part of the are they the workers that they were formed naturally? That's a question we don't have the answers to at this point. But apparently they are insectoid too. When you look at them with their big eyes, their big heads, I mean, but they look somewhat human. They could be I think Jacobs might be onto something there. Maybe these insects, these ant-like insects, these insectilians that he calls, the ones that are in charge of this entire operation, apparently, they created these creatures to help them. Maybe there were other planets that they were at where there were human-like creatures, and they hybridized them, and that's the result. And maybe some of them that we're dealing with now, by this point, they were taken from people here on this planet. They're hybridized versions of. They created hybridized human / insect creatures to assist them do all the work. That's what could be going on here. As insane as it sounds, but the reality is that they are here. That's the thing. We need to acknowledge this. The whole world needs to acknowledge the fact that there's some kind of insect creature here on this planet. That's the situation, folks. Anyway, continuing with this, it says, ant populations are stable. Ants often come into conflict with humans because they colonize homes, and some, like fire ants, have stingers that can harm people. However, they are extremely important members of the ecosystems in which they're found, and they help to aerate soil just like earthworms. Ants usually form colonies with one nest and one queen, but some species have formed huge groups called supercolonies, which can have multiple nests and multiple queens. A supercolony may contain billions of ants that together span thousands of miles. I mean, is that what we're leading to, perhaps? Are we leading to a situation where all of a sudden we're going to wake up one day and this whole planet is going to be infested with giant intelligent insects who are going to just take control of us? Is that where we're heading to? I don't know. I don't think so. You never know, though. Maybe that's the change. But as I'm saying, I think we have to acknowledge this reality as a whole first and then take it from there. But we're not doing that. We're not accepting that. We're still asking questions. We're still wondering. A lot of us, even in the UFO community, I wonder if that was a UFO or not. Oh, we don't know what it was. Oh, maybe it was human-made high tech or something. We're still arguing over nonsense, right? When the reality of the situation is all these people, right, over the decades have encountered these creatures or the craft, right, or the craft. I mean, look at Whitley Strieber. He talked about this in his books. He wrote about it in his books, like Communion and other ones. And they're here. There's something here. They're insect-like. That's what they are. And actually, some of the information that over the years that has leaked from the government, from the people in the government, the United States government, who have studied this, were stated that they're insect-like. I mean, yeah, of course, ants live on all kinds of things, but they'll prey on other insects too, right? They'll do that, and they'll enslave some of their own too. So it's possible that the mentality that we see of ants on this planet could be the mentality of these insects coming from other worlds, but just but on a different level. And here was some more information. I got this from Britannica Online. The ant they're from the family Formicidae. Any of approximately 10,000 species of insects that are social, inhabit, and live together in organized colonies. Yeah, they're organized. Think about that. The ants on this planet are organized. The ants, and they occur worldwide, but are most numerous, both in numbers and in species, in tropical and subtropical regions. Hey, maybe that's the reason why the planet's getting warmer. Maybe there's some sort of the climatization program ongoing, and these creatures, they're the ones responsible for it. Maybe that's what's happening. Maybe they want us to keep using the fossil fuels to heat it up more for them in the future. Ants are essential members of the ecosystems they inhabit, and some even serve as keystone species that have a disproportionately large effect on their ecological communities. Some ants are considered pests to humans, and a number are invasive species in areas outside their native ranges. Ants are social insects, and the colony is a family community of which every ant is an integral part. Apart from the community, any one individual cannot properly function or survive, and the larvae are completely dependent upon the continuous care of the adults. There are generally 3 castes or classes within a colony: queens, males, and workers. Male ants play no part in everyday nest activities. They live only for a short time, occur in limited numbers, and are virtual parasites of the colony, which must feed them. The fertile female, the queen, performs only one task: egg laying. The life cycle of the ant has 4 stages: egg, larva, pupa, and adult, and typically spans a period of 8 to 10 weeks for worker ants. Ants range in size from about 2 to 25 millimeters, or about 0.08 to 1 inch. Their color is usually yellow, brown, red, or black. Typically, an ant has a large head and a slender oval abdomen joined to the thorax or midsection by a small waist. In all ants, there are either 1 or 2 fin-like extensions running across the thin waist region. The antennae are always elbowed. Let me just stop there. Sometimes some people see these things sometimes, and they have antennas on their head. In fact, there were antennas on the head of the creature, well, at least one of the creatures seen in the Vegas video. There are 2 sets of jaws. The outer pair is used for carrying objects such as food and for digging, and the inner pair is used for chewing. Some species, such as the debilitating bullet ant, have a powerful sting at the tip of the abdomen. Now, we don't know if these things have stingers, but we don't know. We don't know what these kind of insects, these advanced insects from another planet, we don't know what they got. But I guess some of those things, maybe they evolved where some of these things they don't have anymore, just like we human beings have evolved, where we don't have certain, like, well, a lot of us are born with no wisdom teeth or some wisdom teeth. I was only born with 3 wisdom teeth. Some people are born with no wisdom teeth because we don't need wisdom teeth anymore. So you wonder what kind of thing, what like these creatures that are coming here, what did they have any kind of features like the ants on this planet have right now, and they lost them through evolution over time? Who knows? But the reality is that we're dealing with some kind of insect kind of creature, apparently from another planet. That's what we're looking at. Anyway. Most ants live in nests, which may be located in the ground or under a rock or built above ground and made of twigs, sand, or gravel. Many subterranean nests are quite extensive, with a multitude of tunnels and specialized chambers. The food of ants consists of both plant and animal substances. Many ants are generalists and utilize a wide range of organic substances for food. Worker ants forage daily, and collected food and water is brought to the larvae and mature ants in the nest. They frequently use scent marks, which they place on their pathways to find their way back to the nest and direct other colony members to a food source. I mean, now look at if you're talking about a creature that could potentially evolve into an intelligent insect on this planet. I mean, looks like ants have they're working together. Sometimes there's army ants. They fight other ants. I mean, they have wars just like human beings. I mean, if something was to evolve other than human beings on this planet, why not ants? But apparently, it's happened someplace because there are advanced insects here on this planet right now, and they have infiltrated our world, and they are up to something of which we are not completely certain. Some ant species are hunters and scavengers. Bullet ants, for example, forage for live spiders, frogs, and insects, including grasshoppers, beetles, and katydids, or their carcasses. You have to wonder, too, when you hear that line there, maybe that probably explains the cattle mutilations, right? They get hungry for that kind of thing. But, of course, that they're not grasshoppers or beetles. They need something bigger, and why not the cattle? Maybe that explains that. It has nothing to do with anything else, any of these other theories thrown out there on why aliens might be doing this. No, they're eating them. They're drinking the blood, perhaps, and eating some of the parts. That might explain it all. Slave-making ants, of which there are many species, have a variety of methods for enslaving the ants of other species. Think about that. Think about that. So slave-making ants we have on this planet. So you wonder, are these creatures from another world, these insect creatures from another world, are they slave-making insects, and they're going to make us into slaves at some point? Maybe that's the whole plan. That's the whole idea. Or maybe we should sit back and do nothing, and maybe not. We'll never acknowledge it. Just let it all happen. Let's not acknowledge it. It's too much. It's too much to think about. Let's just let it happen. Army ants of the subfamily Doralini are nomadic and notorious for the destruction of plant and animal life in their path. The army ants of tropical America, for example, travel in columns, eating insects and other invertebrates along the way. I wonder if they're here to eat some of us, too. Maybe that explains why some of us disappear. Periodically, the colony rests for several days while the queen lays her eggs. As the colony travels, the growing larvae are carried along by the workers. That's all I'm going to share today with ants, but it's something to start thinking about because that's what we're dealing with here. We're dealing with creatures, the ones who are in control apparently are insects. And obviously it looks like the ones that are below them too are based on insects at the very least. I mean, look at the gray aliens. I mean, big eyes just like insect eyes, but somewhat human. I think Dave Jacobs might be onto something with that. Maybe they're just a hybrid creation used for nothing other than work, and that's it, to work for these ones that are in charge, the bigger ones, the praying mantis ones, or ants. Maybe they're, like I said, they're probably more like ants than they would be like praying mantises. Praying mantises aren't as intelligent as ants. Ants are more intelligent, and they are a social creature. And they basically have some kind of a hive mentality, the way they all think the same, basically. They're all working toward one purpose. That's what we could be dealing with here, folks. And until, like I stated earlier, until we get to a point where we can't understand something if we don't at first acknowledge it. That's one of the issues I have here. We will never get there until we all acknowledge this. That's what's happening here. We're dealing with insects, something like ants from another planet. Something to think about. Anyway, I want to say thank you all for joining me today. Until next time.